guest now, I'm very pleased to say, is Denis MacShane, former Minister of Europe under the government of Tony Blair, and a long-term author and journalist, and I'm pleased to say a long-term friend as well. Denis, we have restricted time to talk on this occasion, but just picking up some of the themes of other panels. It's been now 7 years since the UK voted for Brexit. How would you see the relationship between the UK and the European Union in the next 7 years?
I'd like to think it'll get better, but I think there are real obstacles in that path, which I'll discuss in a second. It's 7 years since Brexit was voted, but actually it's about 30-odd years of non-stop campaigning by political forces in Britain. And as we're here in Delphi, I'm going to take the unique opportunity of holding up a book I wrote in 2014 called Brexit, How Britain Will Leave Europe. Nobody would believe me. The BBC wouldn't have me, the Conservative Party wouldn't believe me, the Labour Party wouldn't believe me, Rusi wouldn't believe me. The British establishment didn't listen to the oracle of Brexit. So I hope now that I'm in Delphi, they'll listen to the oracle of what happens next. I'm leaving this book for anybody who wants it. And this is a book called Brexiternity, Why Brexit Will Last Forever. So all the bullshit that it's been done and dusted, it's over, and we're off into a sunny new horizon of togetherness. Forget it. Help yourself, anybody who wants. So, what do we know about Brexit? Economically, we were told before, our GDP would grow, we'd have Singapore on the Thames, we'd have companies flooding in to invest in Britain, unshackled from Europe. All the Europeans would go home to work, and all the white English working class would get all the jobs that were done by Europeans. Hasn't happened like that at all. GDP is down 4%. A third of our small and medium enterprises no longer trade with Europe. Just no longer trade. Maris talked about customs difficulties. It's just too demoralising to fill it in, to pay extra duties. They've just given up completely. The City of London is losing out heavily to Paris and much more to New York, to bourses around the world, because coming to London to float a company isn't worth it. You don't have the capital depths. And if you work in London, you can't jump on a plane and do business in Frankfurt or Paris or Milan or Bratislava or Athens. You've got to go through all sorts of hoops. An example here in Greece, we have a wonderful academic outfit called the British School of Athens. It's been there for 100, 120 years, I don't know how long. It's basically an academic centre for Hellenic studies, archaeology, literature, ancient Greece. But the director of it told me that she's got the money to bring over a professor from England to work for 1 year on research. She has to tell him to form a limited company. You just can't come here as a professor anymore. Well, people smile, but this is just slowly weakening and reducing the strength of Britain. Personal level, everything's become more difficult. Travel is more difficult now at certain times of the year. There are 14-hour queues to leave Dover to go on holiday with children at the Easter holidays because all the passports have to be stamped. It's actually quicker to get out of Sudan for some people than it is to get out of England. You've got children's visits to schools stopped because the British government says, no, we don't accept collective travel, we don't accept ID cards, you must all have individual passports. When I lived in France, I worked in Germany, school kids in those countries don't have the passports we have as adults. These are things that were the decision of the British government, but they're refusing so far to change. Politically, it's been quite extraordinary. I'm a politician. I was an MP for 20 years. I first stood for Parliament in 1974. That's how old I am. Brexit was like a biblical Moloch. It literally swallowed up all the prime ministers. Boris Johnson, David Cameron, Theresa May, Liz Truss. Do you remember them? No, of course you don't. And just spat them out. The Labour Party said, oh, we could go one better. We will have Yanis Varoufakis as our leader. I mean Jeremy Corbyn, who will attack the European Union, who will attack everything, who will love Putin. No, I don't want to talk about Jeremy. He's a very close friend. But the Labour Party was completely lost. That's over to some extent. The Conservatives have finally realised that they're going to stay out of power for a long time. They've got an intelligent Prime Minister, an adult. He's an incredibly rich adult. He's the richest politician in Europe. I wish I was rich too, but I respect his intelligence. But basically, he's worked in Silicon Valley a lot of his life. He's worked in high finance. He's a bit like President Macron. He worked in Rothschilds. He's got brilliant ideas. He's very hardworking and he's very small. But it doesn't mean that either President Macron or Mr. Sunak are necessarily commanding leaders. Probably, as I think you hinted, Kevin, the next election next year, the Labour Party will win slightly faute de mieux. Sir Keir Starmer, very intelligent centre-right Labour politician who doesn't upset anybody, and I think the British people will probably give him a chance on the basis of time for a change rather than some radical move to the left.
We're going to run out of time.
All right, well, very quickly then, what happens next when the Labour comes in? To put any of these things right is much more difficult than is imagined. These are international treaty laws. To return to the single market, I have a T-shirt saying rejoin the single market, but to return to it means, for example, accepting full freedom of movement. And that in Britain is unacceptable in the voting booth because it means, again, all the right-wing papers will say that's a return to mass immigration. We don't have ID cards in Britain. We've never controlled people in the country. We control them coming into the country at the borders, at the ports. To tear that up, it's very hard. And there's 1,001 other things that can't be done unless you accept some serious return to freedom of movement. Alignment, accepting the European Court of Justice, huge problem there for Switzerland as well. The politics are not ripe. It's a bit like, Kevin, maybe, I hope, like prohibition in America. It was passed with such enthusiasm in 1921. It was going to save America. America would stop drinking, become Christian and upright and white and a wonderful, strong country again. Well, it took 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, Al Capone, Chicago, before they realized that prohibition wasn't working. It still took a full 14 years before it was repealed. So bring me back in 7 years' time, after 14 years, we'll see where we are. And I've talked to a lot of friends, political friends in the capitals of Europe, like Maris, like many others, but in Paris, in Italy, elsewhere. I say, can we come back? Do you want us back? And it's a kind of, It was, well, you decided to leave, live with it. You're not coming back for a few years, then suddenly you have another Rupert Murdoch Jr. comes down from heaven and launches another giant campaign against Europe, and out you go again. So it's going to be a long, difficult period and profoundly weakens Europe at the time. On foreign policy, I'll just finish at this point, because that's one of my specialities. As long as Britain was there was a rough equilibrium between France and Germany. Strategic autonomy, closeness to America, friendly to Russia, Britain, and there was a rough and ready equilibrium, and no one country could go in alone without bringing the other two on board. That's blown out of the window. So people are crucifying Macron for some unguarded remarks about Taiwan. They're treating Germany as a defense and military dwarf. And you're getting the big names of Europe are Orbáns and Kaczynskis and Melonis and wonderful human beings, I'm sure. They all go to church, and they must all be good Catholics, but they aren't where Europe needs to be, with intelligent top leaders of the big countries. So Europe minus Britain, even if many, many European decisions have been taken, thanks, I think, to Britain leaving Europe. You're quite right on that. Mrs. Le Pen, Miss Meloni, others have changed their tune because they've seen what a disaster Brexit was. So they're no longer saying, get out of Europe, let's have a Frexit referendum or Italo referendum on the euro. That's good, but it's actually a negative decision. We need a new positive vision for Europe, new positive economic energy, certainly positive military energy. And Britain outside Europe will leave both Britain and Europe weakened, I'm afraid, next time. But I'm an oracle. Bring me back in 7 years and I'll tell you whether I was right or not.
Okay, we'll bring you back in 7 years' time, and we look forward to that discussion. But Denis MacShane, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.